Hello and welcome to Focus on Parliament on Civic Space TV, brought to you by the Center for Constitutional Governance. I am Ayita Kwagala, your host. Pursuant to Article 163 of the Constitution, the Auditor General is mandated by the duty to audit and report on all public accounts in Uganda. Of course, this being an extension of the accountability function of the Parliament. On today's edition of Focus on Parliament, we examine the findings of the Auditor General's report for the year 2024 and what this could portend for the country's governance outlook. Our esteemed viewers, we welcome you to this broadcast. I now have the pleasure and the honor to introduce to you my distinguished guests who are with me here in studio to help us make a sense of today's topic. Let me start with my immediate left is Professor Mwabutsya Ndebesa, a distinguished historian and academic, and also a renowned political commentator. Prof, you're most welcome to the program. Say hello to the viewers.
Thank you, and good morning to the viewers and listeners out there. I'm glad to be here to share with you and the nation on issues of nation building, good governance, and state strengthening.
It's a pleasure to have you, Prof. Next to Prof is the Honorable Salamu Musumba, a veteran national leader and a former legislator. Honorable, it's a pleasure to have you. Say hello to the viewers.
Yes, thank you. It's good to be here again. It's a new year. A new year is upon us. And I pray that we still make meaning of what it is we are doing and how things are going. It's great to have distinguished academicians on the panel to make sense of my politics as well. Thank you.
Many thanks, Honorable, for joining us. And of course, next to Honorable is Dr. Tolit Charles Ayita, the Associate Director of the Center for Constitutional Governance. Dr. Tolit is a legal scholar and a researcher. Doctor, it's a pleasure to have you on the program. Say hello to the viewers.
Thank you so much, Isaac. Very good morning to the viewers and listeners. Yeah, I'm also happy to be here, particularly in distinguished company of an honorable member of the August House, and I think that was one of the most eminent of the houses we've had in the Parliament of Uganda. The very articulate Salamu, Musumba, and of course the professor. And in a country, you know, in cassava republics like this one, where people go through university and never even sit in a class of a professor, it's exciting to be near a professor.
Doctor,
yes.
Many thanks indeed. You start us off on an exciting note. No longer a banana republic, it's now a cassava.
We've gone raw starch.
That's how much we have deteriorated. Honorable, I am going to ask you to start us off. Recently, the Auditor General, in the performance of his constitutional responsibility, presented a report detailing his findings to the Deputy Speaker of the Parliament, the Right Honorable Thomas Tayebwa. But the question I want to ask is that over time, concerns have persisted that this constitutional responsibility has manifested itself more as a ritual, an annual legal ritual, as opposed to being a mechanism for effectively demanding for public accountability. What have been your impressions of this year's annual Auditor General's report?
Thank you very much. First to note, as the Auditor General himself acknowledges, that it's his maiden report, number one. And that he is auditing within the mandate of the Constitution, which is right. But the tone at which he begins is so quite unprofessional. it sounds more of a political discourse with a profession that is so detailed and so important. Our viewers and listeners should know that the audit function and the Auditor General's role and mandate is to be a tool of internal assessment, a tool of betterment of environment, of the operating environment, the financial resources that we have, the management of them, and the trickle down that they must have into the public. And so the audit function is so central in governance and in financial performance of any government that it's at the heart of a competent, viable nation. Without it, you walk blind. Without it, you just are groping in the dark. And so what are we looking at in this maiden Auditor General's report? He has cut out the job for himself. And he says that he is evaluating MDAs, many of them local governments. And my view is that he should have started at the high expenditure areas where our money goes. The high expenditure areas, and those are the areas of defense, because defense takes the majority of resources of this country. It's like we are already in war mode, and that we manage ourselves as a war chest. And he should have, being new and being maiden, I thought he should be a breath of fresh air. Unfortunately not. He's more of the same. And so the tool continues to lose, the tool of audit continues to lose the thrust and the purpose for which it was set up. For instance, if you're looking at the assets of the army that have been acquired over time, he should be able to draw the defense map and the defense expenditure for us as a country to know. How much are we spending in Congo, for instance? How much are we spending in Somalia? How many of the assets that we have bought have been used in outside the territory of Uganda? He should have been able to audit the management of the military and be able to provide Ugandans with an understanding whether we are first-class army or we are mercenaries at the same time, or what is going on. Because that's a very high expenditure unit. Then he talks about PDM. PDM is supposed to be the game changer of the majority of Ugandans. And he treats it in a cash flow event. Has money reached? Has money been utilized as it should have been? But they don't go far enough to understand the impact and the import of PDM. Now, as you know, the president is in Busoga, and he has gone to look at PDM and the 4-acre plan. Two programs that are heralded as game changers for the population. But look at the amount of money he spends at going to assess sport assessment, which is also is all wrong. The entire thing is a mess. Because a president of a country, to be walking the streets of Kamli, to be walking the streets of Mayuge.
He's an extension worker.
An extension worker according to, and not a policy analyst. Because he should be with all the infrastructure available to him, the RDCs, the cows, the chief administrative officers, the operation wealth creation ambassadors out there in our countryside, the ISO infrastructure that is available to him, you see, the intelligence network, all those have failed. They have failed in their boots. His personal venture to go and look at PDM at a village is really an indictment on him. It's an indictment on him that all other systems do not work. And that he himself, I wonder why he has ministers, why he has all those things those people have named countrywide, an infrastructure that has several layers of bureaucracy and that should be giving results to him without him actually making the physical move. And what is he visiting? He's visiting poverty, actually giving a face to poverty and to failure. If I was a president for 40 years, 40, I would be receiving reports every day on everything about the development of my people. Let's go.
Perhaps he's there to source for the reports.
That's the first sign of failure in this digital world. That is the first sign of failure. So what we see is a failure of implementation, a failure of management, a failure of systems, and a failure of all those cohorts of people that he has placed that should be informing him, that is not informing him, that they've become part of the problem of the country. I would have expected the Auditor General to be looking at the finance sector, the banking, the financial resources, because they're so important. And this is the year in which Bank of Uganda lost money. I thought that in itself should have been a very important area for him, because it directly impacts every sector of the country, the financial sector and the non-financial sector. Because if your central bank, the bank of bankers, loses money in such a way, then you can't ask how money is lost in the local governments. Because money is lost in the local governments, and the what they call the single spine payment system starts and ends with Bank of Uganda. It reminds me, as a chair of Kamuli, how much money would be taken back as unused money because Bank of Uganda would not transact business for local governments. And local governments are too weak, they can't even complain. That listen, there's no money coming through to us. So I was hoping that a new Auditor General would bring new life to audit. From what I see, it's not yet that. And it's so frightening if an audit report is so lukewarm. It's not biting, it's not giving direction, it's not in itself understanding the audit function. Reading through it here, there's so much narrative, you know? Too much narrative, and you can't work out the sentences. By the time you're through with a paragraph, you don't know what they've said. So they give you a bulk of 727 pages. That too is to intimidate you. But when you read the content doesn't bite, the content doesn't give direction, the content doesn't say nothing. And that is the biggest disaster we face as a country. If you cannot look inwardly and correct yourself, then you become just a volume of papers on display. There's no tool reintroduced in how to better manage a government. And I think if you were talking from a military perspective, that could near sabotage, from my understanding of things.
That's a damning verdict, Honorable. But let me now come to Professor. Professor, this report, in your assessment, does it differ from the previous reports that we have received from the Auditor General's Office? What are your key impressions of it?
Thank you. But before we go to even the exact outcome of that report, I think I want to join my sister here to talk about the role of the Auditor General's Office, the central role. It plays a very big central role in what the political scientists call horizontal accountability. This is not accountability from the citizens vertically, but the central government office holding others accountable. But it is holding the other offices accountable through also the Parliament, where the report has been sent and where the Auditor General's Office is reports. Now, the Auditor General, the Auditor General's report or office is not necessarily auditing financial issues only. The modern way of auditing goes beyond finances. Finances, yes, but beyond. You are talking about auditing systems. We are talking about value for money auditing. And she was talking about, for example, the money spent in this wealth creation, whatever it was. Possibly more money should be given to that office to do value for money auditing, because it is very easy for somebody to go and get receipts on Nkrumah Road, or even if it's not in Nkrumah Road, he can collude with some other government functionaries and make accountability to the Auditor General financially, and you come and balance the books. But there should be on the spot auditing, value for money auditing. The Auditor General should also be auditing regulations to see whether the regulations and the acts are followed and the Constitution is followed in terms of regulations, regulatory framework, in terms of systems, in terms of value for money, and then, of course, the finances. Now, when you read through the report, you don't find much money of those done, or if they are done, not so effectively and efficiently to point out to the loopholes. As you know, our state or government is weak. Not weak in the sense when we talk about weakness of the state. Immediately people look at the capacity of the state to coerce citizens to believe in it or to follow it. No.
To rough them up.
Yeah, not that aspect. The strength here I'm talking about of the state is those systems. So when you hear that a certain health center 4, instead of having 55 staff, it has only 5. Those are systems failure, which the Auditor General can also do and feed into maybe the head of government systems, who is the Prime Minister. And then the Prime Minister's office sees how to write, to correct those mistakes of the systems and of regulations. And whether, for example, let's use the Parliament itself. I have not comprehensively read the report, but I don't know whether it is talking about this what the media, the social media pointed out about even Parliament itself because in the other, they got it a display or what?
Exhibition.
Parliamentary exhibition. They were pointing out very many systems going wrong there, including recruitment, including how monies were paid to some people as casino even before they had started working. I mean, the Auditor General's report with its independence and its bird's view should point out those systems failure and regulations failure. You've had, for example, the National Planning Authority complaining that the ministries and the finance and the rest do not actually follow the National Development Plan. The Auditor General is supposed to look at that systems and regulations failure. There is a whole issue of the financial finance, which is that one in Parliament, Management Act. Are they following those regulations? And if not, he should, the Auditor General, that is, should recommend to Parliament and the government generally. There are state parastatals which are supposed to be making money, but they are making losses. So we would expect the Auditor General to radically, maybe even ask the management of those loss-making entities to be sacked, or those entities to be closed, so that we strengthen state institutions. So, but anyway, ultimately, the report is also there. There is another ritual now. We are calling it ritual this time because it is not effectively having outcomes we expect from them. The report is handed over to Parliament, and Parliament is supposed to exercise its mandate of overseeing government and make recommendations. Now, following on the previous reports of the Auditor General, we don't see much that has happened in terms of sanctioning the officers who didn't follow those regulations, who didn't follow systems, who also maybe did not account. We see there is nothing that has been done. He should also give us some technical advice where government also practices patronage, where people are not appointed the right way, where finances are not spent the right way. And he should also have, because in passing he says he also audited the other money which is supposed to be kept secret. What is it?
Classified.
Classified. But then he simply says we audited it. He doesn't give us what he found out and what remedies should be there, because we are talking about 1.5 trillion shillings that classified expenditure, which the Parliament will not look at. But maybe in general terms he should have generalized and said this money should not be spent like this, or should have done this or done that. Honorable here has talked about this money which got lost from the central bank. And possibly there are other monies that get lost from ministries and departments to the level of spending, and nothing can be done. Now, he should give us proposals to strengthen the other office, his counterpart, the Controller General's office. How does money get spent in millions of US dollars like that without the Controller General knowing? How? What is his recommendation to strengthen that office so that even money before it is spent, there are certain safeguards? If I were government and I was advising government, I would say, for example, no money exceeding 1 million US dollars. That's a lot of money in our standards. Should be spent without an alert given sent to the Controller General and the Auditor General. The Auditor General is supposed to do the last thing. The Controller General and even the Governor of the bank. How do you spend more than 15 million US dollars without an alert going to the Governor of the Central Bank? What does he do? What does he do? And what is the Auditor General recommending? So we want the Auditor General to be so modern and not concentrate only on financial transactions without looking at systems of financial transactions, without looking at frameworks of financial transactions, without looking at the general framework and recommend how to overcome those state weaknesses. Because the issue should not concentrate only on how the money was spent and accounted for, but why the money was spent, whether it followed the systems, it followed the regulations, it followed the frameworks that were put in. And if it was not followed, then demand for accountability, political accountability, not necessarily financial accountability. The Auditor General can cause political accountability and administrative accountability of various offices for having flouted the regulations and framework of using public funds. Yes.
Thank you, Professor, for your perspective. Doctor, I now want you to wear a citizen's hat and give us your perspective. Are you satisfied as a citizen with the assessment of the Auditor General with respect to the treatment and management of the public purse? As a citizen, I emphasize.
Yeah, truly. You say citizen, but I think under these circumstances,
You're a subject.
You want to venture
are
out.
a subject. We are subjects.
See, we have been made subjects.
And I'll gladly take it to that. Of course, definitely, the Honorable Musumba has put us at an interesting trajectory, because she points out two key issues that are very crucial in accountability. One is the issue of process that she raises. The other is the issue of agency. I know I really love that element of agency, and I keep using it again and again, because you see, she starts with the report itself. Look at, and I took a glance at the report. I've also not really read it, but I took a glance at it. What shocks me, for instance, for a report of that magnitude, and I want to accept that the people who've done this report are requisitely qualified and they know what they're doing. But what is at the top of this report? It's really unorthodox in terms of, actual structural reporting. We know, for instance, in Uganda, that the office of the Prime Minister is the head of government business. And probably if you were doing any proper structured report, that should be your entry point, because that's the coordination center. When you look at this report structure, the office of the Prime Minister is number 3, in terms of items dealt with. And it starts with the Minister of Defense. One would argue, yes, defense is important, security is important for us, but for me, immediately I see defense at the top, two things come to my mind as a citizen. One, it tells me what government priorities are. That means government priorities are really not on us, the subjects. Their priorities are elsewhere. The other thing is that for me, it basically, this report, again, as Honorable Musumba says, it is so clogged in text that it does not look like an accountant's report, So for me, it sounds more like a communique from an apologist. And I think the government has succeeded in one thing. I think we need to look carefully. I think the government's public relations machinery has really expanded. All these people seem now to be speaking, speaking to the king and what the king would like to hear. So for me, that is my concern in terms of the approach. But I want to juxtapose this against global principles and standards. This report mentions three things. The entire report has three running themes. One is the issue of government struggling with, what do they call it? Failing to spend. He uses the term. There's a lot of unspent monies. But we also know that most of this is borrowed. Yes, absorption. Yeah. And we know that this is borrowed money. And what is bothering for we, the ordinary people, is that many studies, many investigations, many observatory comments have showed that public service, is really struggling. The health centers, like the professor talks about, the issue of audit beyond monies, but also horizontal audit that accounts or gives agency, to people in terms of what standards are there in public goods. Yes, the hospitals are there, but what standards are there in this hospital? Because a public good must be measured. The OECD talks about four things: access, efficiency, effectiveness, and sustainability. If you used this tool against most of the public services we are getting, they would all fall short. So in essence, these apologists, these new apologists, like in the person of the Auditor General, I don't want to go into the ritual of Parliament, because like you correctly pointed out, this has become ritualistic. Now, beyond the ritual, what is this that we should expect as Ugandans, and what else can we do about it? And I think for me, I'll make this clarion call again. I think we have failed at the center of representation. We need alternative parliament. We need alternative democracy. I think the real issue in this element is the debate around these reports. And the whole thing is taking a very worrying trajectory. Look, the hist at Bank of Uganda, a forensic audit has been done. What has happened, the chair, the speaker the other day communicates to Parliament and says, the president has directed. Now, I know in governance and in classical political science, there should be a fair relationship in any government between Parliament and the presiding government. But there isn't any normative that says Parliament and the presiding state, for lack of a better word, should go to one coffee table, should be sitting on one coffee table. Because where does the president find the audacity, to call and direct Parliament? And I think Parliament needs to wake up to this. This starts small, because this report, the president has said it should go directly they should hand it over.
To him?
To the police, to police investigations.
CID?
Yes, department. But you see, for us, we are not interested just in the antics of an investigation has been done. We as citizens, we want to know, how are our affairs being managed? Bank of Uganda is just a custodian. It is holding the central bank in trust. That bank is our bank. If we were citizens, we would be demanding. But because we are subjects, they throw at us anything. And this is happening. Now, the other last bit in terms of the efficacy of process. is that if you look at the tour the president is taking, and you pick up on what the good professor raised, the question of value for money, look at the parcel to maintain the administration of the president's office. And let's not forget, just the other day, the president went back to Parliament to ask for a supplementary funding, and all related to wage. So there is a huge bulk of people already working with this big man. Why would he have to leave his table and go to the villages? And I would have no problem with that, because a presiding president, yeah, has the latitude, because he's a politician, the head of a political, he can go visit or go make up with his people. But going there to do what? You know, when you say now you're going to check on PDM, you're going to check, and it's a whole bunch of lies. I want to tell you with authority that we are not many from my village who have been privileged to come to Kampala and probably carry a doctorate as I do. I get calls from home. I get people telling me, you know, advise me. The agriculture officer is saying there are people from Kampala coming to visit my farm. Should I arrange for them? So the president, by the way, all these farms he is visiting, I'm telling you, are staged managed. These are not true farms. They are true farmers, but they are people farming with their own money, not PDM. I have got calls where people are telling me, oh, you know, at least you're in Kampala, you helped me. The president promised me a tractor 5 years ago when he visited my farm. But up to today, I have not got. He promised me a generator. And they think I can do something, but they forget that I'm also just a subject.
A PhD subject.
Interesting. Thank you, Doctor, for your analysis. Honorable,
Yes.
I am coming back to you. The Auditor General has pointed out a perennial problem in the way that the government manages the pension and gratuity system. This is a problem that has been recurring in all the past Auditor General's reports. Based on your experience in the House, what approach would you recommend for government to adopt as a means of managing this crisis?
Well, digitally, this should have been fixed long ago. And together with the national ID and all the iris technology, the Pegasus, all those technologies that are available to the security, they should be available to manage the pension fund. And the pension fund is a free money bag that is available. That's why it's contentious.
Free to who?
Free to the state and state actors. I want us to look back in history and remember that in Kunsa and a pack of people in public service, some died in Luzira. It was out of pensions. You mean they've never fixed that since? Remember Bakoko Bakoru Zoe as minister and the things she said about how the pension is managed, National Social Security Fund is managed. Look at the annual verification and validations that are done on who on who is still living and who is dead of the pensioners. They can do it twice a year. Validation.
Bakoko is back.
Bakoko is back. I'm told she's contesting.
She's now part of the kitchen cabinet.
Yes.
You know, the kitchen cabinet in this country sits in
Gulu.
Gulu. So maybe soon we shall be close to power.
It's strange to say the least. And so,
the shadow state.
I want you to look at that basket of confusion and why the Auditor General chooses the weakest link without depth. Because there's a history, there's a profile on the pension fund. He has not cited nothing about it. Because this is over a decade and it has not been resolved. He just talks about it. You see, the Auditor General office is also being weaponized to be this talk shop that they've talked about stuff, and therefore they're doing something about stuff. And yet it's an aperture, it's an opening for crude crime cover. What has he said about pension? I've just been reading. Nothing. He's just narrated a story about what is known on the surface. But he has not made any linkages with the past. Because as a new man, he should be able to link back and talk about the money that was lost in billions, in trillions of that pension fund through the, what, I don't remember the case, those guys that ripped off.
Yeah, the obeys.
The
Ramafa,
obeys.
Obe,
The obeys.
and the,
How was it sorted? How was it tightened? How was it digitalized? How was it secured? Because there's even a digital security. How has that happened? Do we have pensioners with a different identification? When you clock pensionable age, to take from Professor Ndebesa here, is there a flag? Is there a notification? Like you have now gone to the pensionable class. Is that notification automated? Because you see, we are being treated to stuff that is moribund, that is old. It's not for this age, you know? An Auditor General is so old-fashioned, not fit for purpose, not for today, with the things we are dealing with. I kept telling the viewers that I visited Sweden, and the Auditor General there, in part of the talking, said he had offered to come and help set up systems that audit in real time, not post-mortem, but in real time, so that you correct. That offer was rejected. Yes.
No, they have to.
They have to.
You see, like...
You see, this is
report,
about knowledge transfer. Knowledge transfer, we are pervasive to knowledge. We are paper-based. We are raw, rumor-mongering-based. And we want to refer to the law without doing anything to add value to what we are doing. And this is what is here in the Auditor General's report. If you looked at the old audit reports, it is the same template they use, the same template to say the same nothing. And then when it goes to Parliament, look at the report writing. The first weapon is in report writing. How reports are written even in Parliament. They are a repeat. I've been part of, over time, as we offered the opposition, the official opposition, I was part of the report writing, the report analysis, and opening up new opportunities to widen the scope and the latitude of so many things, including audit. And I'll tell you, over the years, the quality of reports from the audit committees is so base, is so bogus, by intention, to cover up. And so the failure is also within the committee work. The committee staff, the committee members, the committee chair, they have failed in the audit. Using just one tool, report writing.
Thank you, Honorable, for your perspective. Doctor, you wish to say something in a minute before we go for the break.
Yeah, for me, I just want to reiterate that point on the quality of analysis in Parliament.
Yeah.
That is the only opportunity we have. These debates need to be scrutinized. I'll tell you this, yesterday, the other day and yesterday, the British Prime Minister has come under a hell of trouble. And if you listen to the debate, you would really see people who are serious. They are proposing an amendment to the education bill. And there are just two aspects they want to look at. One is that there's what they call public schools there are actually schools that are paid for. What they call academies are schools then that come under the realm of government and are supported. Now, they have proposed to get a number of schools and put them back in the academic fold. Their argument is that this will increase standards. This will also create standardization for a number of communities and all that. But there's just one thing that is sticking out. Under that system, everything else is done by government, apart from the fact that you have to buy uniforms. Now, the uniforms, because of the interface with the private sector, uniforms have become more or less like a signature, or a headline thing. Kids are wearing fancy, blazers and all that, and the school determines. So, for an ordinary parent or citizen, you have access to the school, and then to buy a uniform becomes a problem, because and this is happening in Uganda here. You find you're paying almost 300,000.
Actually, if you asked me whether to pay school fees or to the requirements, I'd rather pay school fees.
Yes.
Because the requirements are almost double.
Yes.
The amount for school fees.
Yes. So we don't, our parliament is not debating. It's not scrutinizing anything. This tells you, because these are the nitty-gritties of a policy that you must see. Because you need to ask this policy, if it is promotional in nature, who is it going to benefit? And that is why I'm saying that this report, I wouldn't even mind the nature and texture of the report, but if it can go through a scrutiny. But when you see that serious matters, like a forensic report of government of Uganda being smuggled away out of public scrutiny, it simply tells you the attitude of the leadership. So, two things are happening. Either we have a president who is a captain of a ship without sailors on board, because there is this what they call the Webstian political structure. You either have a captain, a president, who is in cohort in his policies with his ministers and cabinets and all that, and they're in sync and speaking the same language, or you have a captain who has actually reneged on his team, and he's now pursuing his own agenda. And I seem to see that happening here. Because look at PDM, look at all these, because now like the PDM, we are harping over it like it is some game changer. I even call it game changer. But if you looked at the catalog...
A game changer for who?
If you looked at the catalog of these self-help community programs, how many are they? I think they run to the 20, starting with the Temangalo and, the nomenclature. Actually, Ugandans are very smart people because they are so good at cramming these acronyms. Me, I have run out of them.
Focus on Parliament takes a short break. Do stay with us. We'll see you back shortly.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back. We are glad you're still watching Focus on Parliament on Civic Space TV. In this segment, we continue interrogating the report findings of the Auditor General for the year 2024. Professor, there is a key finding of the Auditor General which points to a mismatch between the planning process or stage of the government vis-a-vis the execution process or stage. And the Auditor General is of the view that there is a lack of coordination as between the different agencies of the government that are responsible for these functions. Earlier, you correctly pointed out by alluding to the mismatch between the National Planning Authority and the Ministry of Finance. How do we get ourselves out of this ditch?
How do we get out? That is very complicated. And the recommendations will not be taken because that broadens now the debate to patronage, the political patronage in the country.
Isaac, maybe I give Professor information. Maybe this will benefit your discourse. You also need to know that there is also another angle to it. These ministries are being run by what they call, I don't know, they call them white cheats or blue cheats. These ministers get cheats from the president almost on a daily basis. So the other question would be, is it actually the Minister of Finance or is it National Planning Authority that is running the affairs
of the country?
Of the country. There is that element to it.
So I was talking about this patronage, the patronage system. The systems that we are running are under patronage. And we have got the shadow state and the real state. And therefore, the Auditor General is making comments and observations and reviews on the real state, whereas there is the shadow state somewhere.
Deep state.
Deep state or shadow state or...
Those are two different.
they are
Or the real
different.
state, for that matter.
So we have got a myth state. You know?
Are we back on mythology?
Now, yeah, mythology. Now, the Auditor General's report, if you read it technical as it may, it is missing out on the other shadow state, the other shadow government, which is somewhere that you cannot easily hold accountable, because you can't hold accountable officers of the state, of the shadow state. That is the challenge in Uganda and most African countries, that we do not have, well, no, we have. We have two states here. You have the official state, the legal official formal state, and the informal state. And the Auditor General is auditing the formal state, and yet the money that is appropriated from Parliament also goes to the informal state. And that informal state is not auditable, it is not touchable, it is not held accountable, and that explains the mismatch. So I think in that respect, I wish the members of Parliament could follow it up and see this mismatch and coordinated movement of troops in the ministries, which explains the poor performance of the state or of the government. You will find there are certain programs, many programs, some of them are not official programs. They've never had a sanction from the cabinet or sanction from policy structures or from the of Parliament or from the cabinet secretariat, but they are on the ground, even with different names which are not official names. So how do you, I don't know even these names we use, whether they are the official names. If you talk about a Myoga or whatever, are those the official names that grow and whatever? Now, when the auditor is auditing, he doesn't audit those shadow names also, shadow programs, shadow system, well, not systems, they are not systems. So, coming to planning,
Shadow mafia networks.
Planning, I think needs also some commitment, but also technical knowledge. technical experience, technical knowledge and vast experience in management of the state. But in his inaugural speech, the president said, or when he appointed the ministers, he said he now is going to work with fishermen. By that he meant people who were not technical, who were not experienced, but who can somehow, through a feeling of mobilization, do work. Now, those coordination systems, coordination problems of government arise out of sometimes lack of technical knowledge, lack of experience in governance systems, lack of commitment to serving the public good, and a combination of those lack of makes the whole planning system weak, and by extension the state is weak and it does not provide the public good and services it is supposed to provide, and by extension again it lacks legitimacy from the population, it lacks performance, it lacks trust. Because how would government, how would citizens or subjects for that matter trust any of these institutions? You look at administration of various entities of government, administration of justice, administration of land, administration of finances, administration of various services, administration of education services, administration of transport. We don't even have public transport in Uganda. I don't know whether the Auditor General also has got a bigger political mind. Even if he's a technical person, he is at that level where he can also advise certain things for government to do. Even benchmark, I've never come across very many countries where there is no public transport. We don't have public transport in this country. We don't have even any policy on housing, on public housing. I mean, how even if it is private, but a policy on the housing. By the way, the last time government was privatizing public service houses, there was a pronouncement or a policy that the government houses, properties, were going to be sold to the private, and then the proceeds, the money from that, was going to be used again to construct new houses for maybe subsidizing renting or subsidizing low-cost housing. It has never been done.
Another PDM.
We don't know where that money went. By the way, do the auditors follow such a programs? Where did that money go? The money that was received, the revenue that was received from selling government public service houses and other parastatal properties. By the way, posts had properties, UCB had properties, railways had properties, name them. Where did the money go? Who has that money? Where did it go? Does the Auditor General also follow up that money, and we know where the money that we got?
I remember they established an escrow account. Has he ever audited?
Bank of Uganda.
Yes, that escrow account.
To find out whether even that
Whether
money
it's
that
there
money
even.
there.
is there. By the way, the Auditor General is also supposed to audit government properties. I know in this country we have properties that just got lost in thin air. If you follow the history of public properties from the colonial period, the government public money was used to construct stores. This natural music you see, those were supposed to be stores for the Africans. But now it is under private hands. How did it go to private hands? As public properties. So, if you look at public properties or assets for that matter, the Auditor General is supposed to audit public properties. Where are those public properties of the government of Uganda? And how are they used, or how were they used, or if they were sold, where did that money go?
We need closure to understand, to be able to know where the privatization policy ended.
Has it ended?
Has it ended?
Do
It
I
is
know?
maybe ongoing.
Do I know?
But where did the money go?
No, so that we know how much did we collect, from where, and where is it.
And if it was kept, has it gained some
Even if it
interest?
did. So,
Has it gained some value? But the planning process in this country is a big failure. And there were even people who were proposing that the Ministry of Planning should be restored. I don't know why it was merged with finance to confuse us. Because there is a lot of planning that is necessary in this country. And we expect the Auditor General, since he has got that bird's view, and maybe technical view, he should propose in his recommendation some of those issues. When you find that there is a failure in the planning process, there is disorganization in planning, you propose that we put aside a Ministry of Planning that would hold accountable when there is mismatch in planning processes. But now it was merged with finance, and then there is a planning authority, an authority without authority. It says that you should do this. Finance and other departments do differently. So I am not surprised about that mismatch about the planning process. And even if he recommends, nothing will be done, because some of these recommendations, although finally you hand over the report to the Parliament where you are supposed to report, the leader of government business, which is the ministry, which is the Prime Minister's office, supposed to coordinate other government departments and agencies and ministries, should take up some of those recommendations and maybe write, because we have a planning crisis in the country. We have, and it is observed that we have a planning crisis. Maybe have a white paper be produced through which we can discuss as subjects or citizens and the government, and we come up with proper planning in this country, and we get away from this Kwagala where people continue joking that good policies are made in Uganda, perfected in Kenya, and implemented in Rwanda. We should get away from that, because, and one way to get out of that is to have technical planning, strengthen the state, build the state, because our state is weak. Forget about those who say, no, our state is not weak, it's not a failed state, because we can suppress opposition. That's not the point. That's not the point, because
that's besides the point.
After all, a strong state should be the one where citizens accept the authority of the state without coercion, but through conviction, through consent, not coercion. So remaining with this coercion and having political prisoners, one of the indicators of a state that is not properly functioning and is not a nation state proper is having political prisoners. If we got functioning states like Australia, New Zealand, Japan, European countries, Canada, USA, you won't find their political prisoners. I want to imagine that even in Botswana, which is now doing very well, or Mauritius, or now Ghana, which is coming up, that you will find political prisoners. One of the indices of poor state functioning is having political prisoners, meaning you are using coercion rather than consent to manage public affairs.
Thanks, Professor, for your thoughts. That's food for thought. We hope that the relevant stakeholders are listening and they will take heed. Honorable, back to you. On the issue of the performance of the Auditor General, by law, is an officer of Parliament. But there is a long-standing and perennial charge that the Parliament lacks the commitment or the goodwill, if you like, or even the capacity to really implement the recommendations of the Auditor General, which are reflected in his report, their annual report. So the question I want to ask is that, is this a question of apparent collusion between the Parliament and the Office of the Auditor General, or it's an indication that Parliament has since reneged on its responsibility to be an accountability organ of the of the state.
But they are also under captivity. The other day they called them clowns.
Parliament has chosen to do business privately with those that they oversee. That's the choice they have made. And they are novel.
They are wise clowns. They are very wise.
And it's
They are very
to
wise.
write about. They've made a choice. And when people make a choice, they know the options. And so it's very sad, but so true, that do not expect a report, a normal audit report from the committees. Don't. If you are an analyst like me, the body of the report and the conclusion of the report are two separate things. What you see in the media, because Parliament opened up its committee work and its activities to the public so that the public can follow through. They even proposed to have a TV of Parliament and a radio of Parliament so that the citizenry, the subjects, would follow and track. Unfortunately, the conclusion to all that you see is self-defeating.
There is also a mismatch between the body and the conclusion.
The body and the conclusion. I want you to go back to the report on Bank of Uganda. That one by Honorable Katuntu and Honorable Among in Kosase. Just look at it. You'll be totally shattered. Viewing what was happening, viewing the body of the report and the conclusion of the report. Time wasted. No work done. What would you call that, Professor? You're treated to a melodrama? You're treated to what? To catastrophic what? To a tragic something?
Subterfuge.
I don't understand the English word you can use for what we have been treated to as a country.
I think we need our theatre to revive the plays of Shakespeare.
No, it's, yeah. Actually, that reminds me of Macbeth. There's this saying that fall is fair and fair is fall. Hoover through the fog and fills the air. It just tells you the dicey situation in which governance is ongoing in our and unfolding in our very eyes. And so the failure is at parliamentary level. The scrutiny, I don't think even the staff of Parliament up to the job. No. They're not. Because the majority of them, this is their first job, their first assignment, and they know nothing else. I don't know whether there are any more seniors in Parliament, people with professional aptitude to be able to do the professionalism that is working.
They probably are there, but there is a normative framework, the norms, and the atmosphere in which they are operating. That's why they go and investigate very well, but they conclude differently.
No. Even that
because
is not happening. Because I'll tell you, the Parliament you talk about, the 6th Parliament, there was so much support from the US and from UK, the House of Commons, a Commonwealth Parliamentary Association. There was also the Americans. And you can only help people who want to be helped. I don't think there's anything residual of all that investment in Parliament that happened from the US government, from the British government, and from the Commonwealth. There's nothing residual remaining. And so you need to look at, if for instance, like the Zimbabwean Parliament, as raw as it is ISO certified. If we were looking for an ISO certification of our Parliament, you could redeem it. But if you have nothing to aspire for, anything goes, there's no remedy at all. And so, let us not waste the time of viewers and listeners there to talk about anything there until we aspire to get to an ISO certification of our parliament and our parliamentary procedures. Maybe that can give us a game changer in the procedures and in the central nervous system of governance and accountability.
Doctor, going forward, how do we improve the accountability framework or mechanisms of the government, if you like?
For me, by the way, as usual, I'm a little radical in my views, maybe because of my socialization. I really think that we need to hijack Parliament and return it to the people, because we are not going to fall short of calling for scrutiny, because that is the heartbeat we have, like the Honorable Salamu Musumba says. I'll tell you a story. I think about 10 years ago, I happened to be what they called then a research pupil at the university, at the London University of LSE,
London School of
Economics and
Economics.
Sciences. And there was a program that gave me an opportunity to interface with a group of African scholars. They called it the graying mantle. The thinking was that these scholars had come of age and are passing on, but to whom do they pass the grey mantle? So from Uganda, it was me and Dr. Semgere Chaze, who is now at University of Witwatersrand. He started off as, I think, a journalist in the Monitor then. So we worked, and our tutor, our teacher from Uganda was, the late Professor Nabdere. His soul rest in peace. And this is where I picked the idea of, the alternative government, alternative democracy, taking democracy to the people. Because I think as citizens, we've got to a point where we need to question. We need to question the whole structure of representative democracy and whether it is delivering us public goods. We had Professor Ali Mafeje. He's of Guyanese origin. He's a professor of sociology. He sits at the American University in Cairo. We had Mwendawiro Mganga from Kenya, Anyang Nyom, Abdul Shevji who is now the head of the Vice Chancellor of University of Wits. And all these dignified gentlemen came to one argument. We did this work for 1 year. We scrutinized democracies. And again, like the Honorable Musumba said, there are some sections of Africa that are working. So it does not mean that the entire structure has failed. So going forward, and I want to pick from what she's saying, we need to aspire for higher. And we need to find the enablers. There are two things I have seen. Just like you mentioned of the Office of the Auditor General, I have looked at the policy statement in about the last 2-3 years in different government ministries, but particularly the institutions of accountability, the JLOS institutions and all that. One veneer that runs, like the apologist in the Auditor General, there is no coordination. So this coordination thing, we know it. We know it's not there, but why can't they fix it? Everybody is working in silos. When you come to Parliament itself, I have looked at some standards. You look at the Professor mentions it. Look at New Zealand, look at Australia, look at the UK. When an Auditor General's report is brought to the floor, accountants and finance experts and political economy experts have argued, scrutinized and argued, and have said that report can be discussed and concluded in 3 months. Look at our time frames. What are we doing? This thing has become a ritual in Uganda because now this report has been presented. Work will not start on this report work will not conclude on this report almost until when the next report is being brought to the House. That shows you, that exemplifies the level of incompetence in the House. The parliamentary staffers on the committees, I think to be fair, probably they need to be trained more, because that's where one of the gaps are. The Honorable Musumba said this report is about 700, 800 pages. Summarizing that report to a credible structure that then can be fed into the committees for business probably is going to take another 6 months. Nobody just seems to know what to do. But it's not that...
They go replying page by page, so
yes.
they will produce another 700-page response. We agree, we don't agree,
so you see,
nothing.
It bogs down business. Then the members of parliament themselves, we need some people with speciality. And you see, this is what we've been arguing. We were telling these people, okay, we don't have a problem. This senior 6 and equivalent, yes, is a good thing. It allows, but this is not a mass football field.
But besides that, Doctor, even when they are assigning the chairpersons of those various committees, it is now done politically. They don't look at the committee and maybe link it and align it with technical knowledge and the expertise. They just pick somebody because he has not eaten in the last quarter.
Well,
they need him to eat.
Fishers of men.
They need him to eat. And you know, those parliamentarians are also wise enough. They will just appear to be shouting and scrutinizing.
Dramatizing.
Only for the people who are expected to be sanctioned to respond and come and oil them outside Parliament. That's how they are making business in Parliament.
And actually, you bring an interesting thing. When I look at it from the perspective of being a lawyer, and who do you call as witness, you need to have some thinking around it. There are many witnesses they summon. First of all, they summon so many witnesses. There are many witnesses they summon who actually end up hostile to the committees. So the lead counsel in these committees, you ask yourself, okay, there are many law schools, but anyway, that's for another day.
But you know, even the Parliament has the latitude to hire expertise if it does not exist in the committees. You see?
You see?
And that expertise is rejected because it's not about expertise, it's not about Uganda, it's about creating loopholes in which you do business.
So anyway, for me in a nutshell, can this parliament be salvaged? Yes, it can. This parliament needs a think tank. We are already lending service here. I don't know whether somebody, maybe because of the Honorable Musumba, they might accept that we are experts in this thing.
No, but I'm an expert in my own right.
Hopefully.
No, I know that.
Yeah.
So but if it goes beyond expertise, it is a political question. The Parliament of UK, you see, Parliament performs depending on its history. The UK Parliament, which is our example, they started with Magna Carta. That is about 1,000 years ago. There was a glorious revolution. And there was a revolution where actually they experimented with republicanism. Parliament itself actually removed the king and had somebody else. So there have been stages through which Parliament has liberated itself from captivity by the executive, but also has renewed its commitment and values. You see, the value base of an organization, an institution, matters a lot. Before you have the pillars arising out of that value base. Is a value base about serving a public good? You can continue.
No, yes, I'd just like to conclude this way. And there are two areas I want to look at. And actually, I want to urge my good sister here, the Honorable Salamu, to join some of this thinking. I really think that the civic space needs to be hijacked and returned back to the people. The political parties, the civil society organizations, I think should find a modus of beginning to convene alternative parliaments. Because you see,
Like,
as long
like
as we
that of
can-
Nandutu?
Yes. Well, many things are vulgarized in this country, but the idea is a good idea.
Before it caught her. Before it caught her.
The issue is that we need to discuss, we need to scrutinize the government's prepositions. We need to scrutinize them.
What is the
Because
space?
We
and
create the
we
space.
We need to fight for that space. That space, Julius Caesar says, in a way of conclusion, leaders are made of staying staff. And nothing is going to come on the table. You mentioned which revolution, the other revolution, the political elite, the business elite, and all the other categorizations of elites, the unions and all that. In as long as Ugandans do not find a conversation in sync, we are stuck with this edifice.
They had better become citizens and stop being subjects.
Honorable, your concluding remarks on the program.
Well, this is a very nice discussion that should be happening elsewhere and replicated elsewhere in the different councils, local governments, which should be replicated at regional level. Even the intellectual potency of this country is gone. We need to revitalize the finer intellectual discourse. And Makerere was doing it so well until Nawangwe came. What has happened to you? I mean, there's no public intellectual
The Freedom Square
discourse.
is now closed.
I think we need to create a Freedom Square.
They're about to put a building in it.
No, but it is already closed with a metallic fence.
Is it?
Yes.
Really?
There is a metallic fence
Then-
around it.
then
If you go there now,
Makerere
first
is
of all, you
an
ask for
alien.
permission.
It's alien
But
now
if
to
you
me.
went there also, and the police came, you have nowhere to escape. It is now enclosed. So it has lost its freedom.
It's no longer freedom.
It is no longer Freedom
All
Square.
right. We must replicate our freedom spaces in which to discuss and see ourselves eye to eye, because we are missing the eye contact. And so I think that will be very helpful in our terrain, the political terrain in which we are, to get back to the middle ground and discuss how Uganda becomes a viable, competitive, political entity before we get lost and never to be found. And so it will take you on my left and on my right to create that space in which we all participate. Because for some of us, we have already chosen to be political parties. And therefore, we need also to be invited to that space and participate and offer our options and debate other options that will be put on table. I think the time is ripe. We have nothing left to lose. 39 years
All that is to be
of
lost
wasted time.
is lost.
That's a clarion call for redemption. Professor, your closing remarks. on
My
the program.
closing remarks are like this, that the office of the Auditor General is a very central office of government. If used properly, it can be an instrument of strengthening the state for better service delivery and public goods delivery. But that instrument has not been used properly, and a debate ensued here that you find at times the report is written in a flowery way, or even the findings are there, but the conclusions are mismatched with the body,
A counter.
because people have to censor themselves. In other words, the atmosphere for such an office creating a space for strengthening the state is not free. I think it is not free, and many offices are not free, and many report writers are not free to write. They censor themselves, and the public also. Here we are talking about the public participation. Possibly there should also be moved in Parliament a bill of public participation and engagement to strengthen it, to strengthen the civil society or society generally to engage, to publicly engage. What has happened hitherto is for making amendments in the constitution and making laws to weaken civil society, to actually shrink the public space. We need to have maybe a bill. I don't know whether it will be passed, but we can see how it can be passed. A public engagement bill and subsequent act that would create a legal space for citizens to engage government. And this government shouldn't fear that. Government needs to strengthen state-society relations, and healthy state-society relations will in turn create a real strong state, not these shadow states, not these shadow governments that operate underneath, when on top we have got a constitution, a legal constitution giving certain provisions, certain spaces, when underneath we don't have them. Otherwise, if we don't strengthen the state in the real strengths, we can have the state disappear. It disappeared in USSR, it disappeared in Yugoslavia, it is more or less disappeared in Sudan, in Libya, in Congo. I am afraid it can disappear here, but let's not wish that we have a failed state here. Let's strengthen the state, and the office of the Auditor General can be an instrument for strengthening the state. Not only should Parliament take heed, society should take heed, but much more so the office of the Prime Minister should pick that document, weaknesses in it notwithstanding, look at that document and see this mismatch in planning, in systems, failures here and there, and follow it up to strengthen the state institution, to strengthen the coordination of different ministries and departments for service delivery, for public good delivery, and in return, government can even be selfish on that. Once the state or the government provides services and goods, it gets legitimacy. It also strengthens itself and gets away from using coercive means. It gets away from political prisoners and goes to a stage and transforms to a stage where people are ruled by consent, not by coercion.
State building it is from the good professor. Doctor, your closing remarks on the program?
Well, for me, it's a sad day. We still have political prisoners in jail. We have journalists in jail. We have even young activists who are just retorting what has been said, probably in Parliament or public spaces, being surrounded by security agencies. Look at the case of the little girl in the Twitter space and the Speaker of Parliament. In a country where you are still treated to this kind of abomination, we have no choice but hijack the public space and return it to the citizens so that we can vigorously debate on how we want to be ruled. I see the Stadium of Athens right at my face. There isn't any other time other than now that the book of Othello appeals more than any other place. Thank you.
Doctor being both philosophical and revolutionary. Many thanks.
And
indeed.
well read. the public out there actually wondering what you're talking about. Othello, Macbeth.
On another occasion,
another day.
we'll ask him to elaborate further. But
Yes.
I must appreciate you, Professor, Honorable Salamu, and Dr. Tolit for your able participation on today's edition of Focus on Parliament, and of course for your very exceptional reflections and patriotic guidance to the citizenry out there. Once again, we appreciate you, our viewers, for your company from the start of this program up to its conclusion. Many thanks to the production unit for keeping us live on air. Our esteemed viewers, please engage us on our various social media platforms. We are on X, we are on Facebook, we are on YouTube, where you can watch and also subscribe to our channel. We'll see you next time. Be blessed.